Dinner went quiet after that sentence, but my mind didn't. I watched him eat like nothing had changed, like he hadn't just decided my future for me. I tried to keep my voice steady and asked what he meant. He shrugged and said it was simple, his mom deserved a better place, and since I had the more stable income, it made sense for me to handle most of the payments. Something felt off. Not just the words, but how prepared he sounded. Like this wasn't a thought that came to him at dinner. I asked if we would both be on the house papers. He avoided the question. That's when a strange feeling settled in my chest. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, trying to understand how we got there. This wasn't how decisions were supposed to be made. We always talked things through. At least, that's what I believed. The next morning, I noticed a folder on the kitchen counter. It wasn't hidden, just left there like it belonged. I opened it, thinking it might give me clarity. Instead, it made everything worse. There were printed documents, loan estimates, payment breakdowns, even timelines. My salary was listed clearly, calculated into every plan. But what stood out the most was what was missing. My name. It wasn't anywhere on the ownership section. I felt my hands go cold. This wasn't about helping family. This was something else entirely. I sat there staring at the papers, realizing this had been discussed, planned, and organized long before I ever heard a word about it. When Grayson walked back into the kitchen, I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at him differently. And for the first time, I didn't see my partner. I saw someone who had already made a decision about my life, without me. Before all this, life felt steady and safe. We didn't rush into anything. We built things step by step, making sure we were both comfortable. Our routines were simple but meaningful: grocery runs together, late-night talks about the future, quiet weekends that felt peaceful instead of boring. It felt like we were on the same team. Grayson had a way of making everything seem possible. He spoke about plans with confidence, like nothing could go wrong. He always said we were building something strong, something that would last. I believed him. I trusted that what we had was real. We handled responsibilities in a way that felt fair. We talked about money, decisions, and goals. At least, I thought we did. Looking back, I realized some conversations were more one-sided than I noticed at the time. His mother was always present in small ways. Not physically all the time, but through constant opinions and suggestions. She had something to say about almost everything: how things should be done, what choices made sense, what didn't. At first, I saw it as care. I told myself she just wanted the best for her son. But there were moments that didn't sit right. Times when she would correct me in a way that felt less like advice and more like control. Small comments about how things should be handled differently, usually in a tone that made it clear she didn't fully respect my way of doing things. I brushed it off. I didn't want to create tension over things that seemed minor. I convinced myself it was normal, that every family had its dynamics. I believed that with time, things would settle, and boundaries would naturally form. Instead of questioning it, I adjusted. I stayed quiet when something felt off. I told myself it wasn't worth turning into a bigger issue. I kept choosing peace, thinking it would protect what we had. Things didn't change all at once. It started with small remarks that were easy to ignore at first. Morel would smile while speaking, but her words carried a different tone. She began pointing out how stable my job was, how important it was for a wife to support the bigger picture. It didn't sound like advice. It felt like a quiet expectation. At first, I responded politely. I didn't want to create tension. But the comments didn't stop. They became more direct over time. She would compare roles, hinting that I should be doing more, contributing more, thinking less about myself and more about what the family needed. What bothered me more was how Grayson reacted. He didn't shut it down. Instead, he agreed in subtle ways. A nod here, a short comment there. Sometimes he would repeat her words later, as if they were his own thoughts. It made me pause. I wasn't used to seeing him like that. Simple discussions started feeling heavy. Something as small as planning expenses would turn into a quiet disagreement. I would try to explain my side, but the conversation would lose its balance quickly. Instead of understanding, I felt judged. There were moments when I stopped speaking mid-sentence because I could already sense the reaction. Silence began to fill the spaces where communication used to be. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that feels tense and uncomfortable. I started noticing how often decisions were influenced before I even had a chance to be part of them. It was like I was being included on the surface, but not truly heard. That feeling stayed with me. Sitting at the same table, sharing the same space, yet somehow feeling distant. For the first time, I questioned where I really stood. Not as a partner, but as someone slowly being pushed to the side. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, but I could hear voices from the living room. I wasn't trying to listen, but when I heard my name, I stopped. Grayson and Morel were talking. Calm, focused, like they were discussing something important. I stayed still, just out of sight. Morel said the monthly payments would be easy if everything was planned properly. Grayson replied that my salary would cover it without pressure. He sounded confident, like it was already settled. My chest tightened. Then she asked about his income. He said he would keep it separate, use it for other priorities. His tone didn't change. No hesitation, no doubt. I felt frozen where I stood. They continued talking about timelines, paperwork, and approvals. It wasn't casual. It was organized. Every detail had already been thought through. Every step had been discussed. Then came the part that made everything clear. Morel asked if there would be any issue with ownership. Grayson answered quickly. He said it would be cleaner if the house stayed under his name, maybe hers later. He even said it would avoid complications. Complications. That's what he called me without saying it directly. I didn't move. I didn't breathe properly. I just listened as they finalized something that would affect my life completely. There was no mention of asking me. No concern about how I would feel. No sign that I was part of this decision in any real way. When the conversation ended, I quietly stepped back and went to the bedroom before they could see me. My hands were shaking, but my mind felt strangely clear. This wasn't an idea they were thinking about. It wasn't something we were going to discuss. It was already decided. And I had never been included. I didn't wait long before bringing it up. I needed answers, not silence. When I asked him directly, his reaction wasn't what I expected. He didn't seem surprised or concerned. Instead, he looked at me like I was overreacting. He said I was taking things the wrong way. That I always made simple matters complicated. When I tried to explain what I heard, he cut me off and said I was being unfair. According to him, this was about helping his mother, nothing more. Then his tone changed. He asked why I had a problem supporting family. He said any caring wife would understand. That real commitment meant standing together, not questioning everything. His words were calm, but they carried pressure. I tried to stay focused, but the conversation kept shifting. Every time I pointed out something specific, he turned it into something else. Suddenly, I wasn't asking about the house anymore. I was being accused of lacking care, of thinking only about myself. Morel joined in quietly. She didn't argue directly. Instead, she spoke in a soft, weak voice. She mentioned how difficult things had been for her, how she didn't want to be a burden. She even said she would rather struggle than cause problems between us. It sounded like she was stepping back, but it had the opposite effect. The room felt heavy. I could feel the guilt building, even though I knew something wasn't right. Part of me wanted to stand firm, but another part started questioning everything. Was I being too harsh? Was I misunderstanding their intentions? Grayson noticed the hesitation. He leaned into it, repeating that this was about family, about doing what was right. He made it sound simple, like the only problem was my reaction. By the end of it, I felt drained. Not because the issue was resolved, but because I was no longer sure of my own thoughts. I walked away feeling stuck, caught between what I felt and what they were trying to make me believe. A few days later, I decided to look deeper instead of asking more questions. Talking wasn't helping anymore. I needed to see things for myself. While organizing some papers, I found another set of documents in a drawer I rarely used. They weren't hidden carefully, just placed where I wouldn't normally look. When I opened them, my stomach dropped. There were detailed calculations, monthly payments, long-term plans, and savings projections. But this time, it wasn't just about income. My personal savings were listed clearly, broken down into exact amounts. Even future estimates were included, as if someone had already decided how much I would continue to save. It felt invasive. Every number was used to build a plan I had never agreed to. There were notes beside some figures, marking how quickly things could be paid off if all available resources were used. I didn't need to guess what that meant. Later that evening, Grayson casually brought up the idea of simplifying finances. He said it would be easier if everything was combined into one account. He talked about trust, about making things smooth and organized. His tone was light, like it was just a smart step forward. But after what I had seen, it didn't feel simple at all. It felt like control. I didn't respond right away. I just listened, watching how easily he spoke about something that would give him full access without ever asking how I felt about it. That night, I sat alone, going over everything in my head. The plans, the numbers, the conversations. Each piece started connecting in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't support. It wasn't partnership. It was something planned, something one-sided. For the first time, I stopped trying to explain it away. And I finally admitted something to myself I had been avoiding. I wasn't being included. I was being used. After that night, I stopped arguing. There was no point in repeating the same conversations. Instead, I became quiet and careful. I didn't show anger or confusion anymore. I acted normal, even when I didn't feel it. But inside, everything had changed. I started paying attention to details I had ignored before. Every conversation, every suggestion, every small shift in tone, I noticed it all. I kept a record, writing things down when I was alone. Dates, words, decisions. I didn't trust memory anymore. I needed proof. I also began reviewing my finances closely. I checked every account, every transaction, making sure I understood exactly where I stood. There were things I hadn't questioned before, but now I looked at everything with a clear mind. Slowly, I started making changes. I adjusted my accounts, making sure only I had access. I moved things quietly, without drawing attention. Nothing dramatic, just small steps that gave me control again. I didn't want any surprises later. At the same time, I reached out for legal advice. I didn't tell anyone. I kept it private, asking questions and understanding my rights. It felt strange at first, like I was preparing for something serious. But deep down, I knew I had to. The more I learned, the more my fear turned into focus. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. I watched how they behaved, how confident they seemed in their decisions. They believed everything was moving in their favor. They didn't notice the shift in me. And I made sure they didn't. I stayed calm, spoke less, and agreed when needed. Not because I believed them, but because I needed time. Time to understand everything. Time to protect myself. The pain didn't disappear, but it changed. It became something steady, something controlled. And for the first time in a while, I felt like I wasn't losing anymore. I was preparing. After some time, I changed how I responded to them. I stopped questioning things completely. When the topic came up, I nodded, agreed, and kept my tone calm. I even asked a few simple questions, just enough to sound involved. That shift made a difference. Grayson seemed more relaxed around me. The tension that once filled the room started to fade. He spoke more openly again, assuming everything was back to normal. Morel also softened her approach. Her words became lighter, almost approving, like she finally saw me as cooperative. They believed I had accepted everything. And I let them believe that. At home, things felt easier on the surface. Conversations were smoother, decisions moved faster, and no one seemed worried anymore. They talked freely, confident that there would be no resistance. That confidence worked in my favor. While they moved forward with their plans, I focused on securing my own position. I made sure every step I took was quiet and controlled. I reviewed documents carefully before signing anything, delaying where I could without raising suspicion. I also made sure nothing connected me to decisions I didn't agree with. If something didn't feel right, I found a way to step back without making it obvious. I stayed patient, even when it felt difficult. At the same time, I finalized things on my side. Everything I needed to protect was already in place. There were no loose ends, no risks left uncovered. They continued thinking everything was going exactly as planned. But the truth was different. I wasn't moving with them anymore. I was moving ahead on my own path. Every calm response, every quiet agreement, was part of something bigger. I wasn't trying to fix anything now. I was making sure that when the moment came, I would walk away clean, without losing what was mine. And they wouldn't see it coming. The day everything came together, they were both confident. Papers were ready, discussions were smooth, and the final steps were being taken. I sat there quietly, watching how certain they looked, like nothing could go wrong. They believed this was the moment everything would be secured. When it was time to move forward, I didn't follow the flow like they expected. I placed my folder on the table and opened it calmly. At first, they didn't think much of it. But that changed quickly. I started with the documents. Clear records of plans that were made without my consent. Financial breakdowns that showed how my income and savings were being used. Notes and details that proved this wasn't a shared decision. Grayson tried to interrupt, but I didn't stop. I kept going, laying everything out step by step. There was no anger in my voice, just clarity. Morel's expression changed first. The calm confidence disappeared. She tried to speak, but the words didn't come out the same way anymore. Then I explained the legal side. Everything I owned was already protected. My accounts, my savings, every financial link had been separated. There was no access, no claim, nothing they could touch. Grayson looked at me like he didn't understand what was happening. Like this wasn't the outcome he expected. That's when I said it clearly. I had already filed for divorce. The room went silent. No arguments, no quick responses, just shock. The plan they had built so carefully started falling apart in front of them. The confidence they carried into that moment was gone. Grayson tried to speak again, but there was nothing left to say that could change anything. Morel sat still, her expression completely different now. I closed the folder and stood up. I didn't need to explain more. Everything was already done. They thought they had control from the beginning. But in the end, they lost everything they were trying to take from me. Months passed slowly, but they felt different for me. Life was no longer full of pressure or confusion. I focused on rebuilding everything step by step. My routine became simple again, but this time it was peaceful, not heavy. I moved into a smaller place that I chose on my own. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like mine in a way nothing else had before. I decorated it slowly, without rushing, without anyone else's opinion shaping my decisions. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe properly. Work became easier to focus on. My mind was clear, and I stopped carrying the weight of other people's expectations. I realized how much energy I had spent trying to make things work that were never balanced to begin with. Over time, I understood something important. I didn't lose anything valuable. I let go of something that was already taking more than it gave. I had confused sacrifice with love, but they were never the same. There was silence from their side after everything ended. No more demands, no more plans involving me. Life moved on, but not in the way they expected. I heard through mutual connections that things didn't go as they planned. Financial pressure started building on Grayson, and the stability he once relied on slowly disappeared. Morel's expectations also didn't turn into reality. The idea she had built in her mind never came together. But I didn't focus on that. I stayed focused on my own path. There was no anger left in me, just clarity. I understood now that my value was never supposed to depend on what I gave up for others who didn't respect me. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I had already moved forward. Not just by leaving, but by choosing myself in a way I never had before. And that made all the difference. I wasn't the person they thought they could control anymore. I was free.